Something that's really interesting to me about like femininity coaches is that they're like, one, it's so weird that I mean, I understand politically and like economically why they've sort of arisen, but it's really weird because they're not even doing like what they're saying to do, like being like a stay-at-home mom, taking care of your kids, depending on your husband, submitting to your husband. And it's like you have your own stream of income because you have those weird, like really like scammy like master classes in your bio of like, take my master class 30% off and I can teach you how to be a high value woman. And it's like you have your own stream of income. You're literally like businesswoman. I don't really want to give that title in this case, but like you kind of are a businesswoman. You have your own business of feeding people bullshit. So you're essentially preying on people's insecurities, but in this case, women's insecurities, because like misogyny is very prevalent. I'm just gonna focus on America because like that's where I live. So like misogyny still is very prevalent in America, especially with like the red pill shit and the manosphere shit and the current administration, obviously. But even though we've come a very long ways for women, since they couldn't open a bank account without their husband, they couldn't have their own credit card, they couldn't have a house, they couldn't have their own property, like even though we've come a long way since then, there's still like so many men who have these politics that are essentially like passed down throughout their family where they don't, like there's this one woman, Kylie Brewer, and she's awesome, and she was talking about how like politics are inherited, and it's like, yeah, that's true. And so there's so many men, especially like I'm Gen Z, like a lot of like Gen Z guys that have these very misogynistic ideas of like what not only like what women's place is in the world, but also how a man should like be masculine. Because I notice a lot with guys, like their idea of what masculinity is isn't what a woman would think of given that term. Like it's always like some toxic masculinity. And it's like we don't want that. Like women don't want that. Like masculinity is supposed to be, at least from like what I hear women talk about it and the way I think about it, is like something positive that like adds to your life, but also pushing these very, not the good masculinity, but like going back to what I was saying before, like pushing these very strict gender roles. And that's like a social construct, and I think that's much more talked about now, but it just doesn't make sense to me for certain people who are like my age, especially going to like a good school or anything like that, or if they live in a specific area, like to not sort of look into that or question that, and also not to question that like these people selling these femininity courses are literally creating their own income, probably not married, probably not in a relationship, and trying to push women back, like as if you can't go to school now. Like women are like leading men by a lot in college admissions in general, but also like we're almost, I think women are above men when it comes to law school. I know it's not for like medical school and a different school that I'm blanking on, but like I know for law school it's like either above or it's like half and half now. So you have so many women who are doing better than men, and it's like I guess I just economically I can understand maybe why someone would like take that bait and be one of those people pushing it, but at the same time I feel like it's the women equivalent of like an engineer that's like, I have morals, I care about the world, and then it's like when that Palantir contract comes in, or like when you get that Lockheed Martin internship or something like that, like I feel like it makes sense in certain scenarios for people, like if you're harping on like the religious aspect of it, right, of like in like Christianity in America, it's often like if you don't act these like feminine gender roles towards your husband, towards men, then you're gonna burn in hell. Like, so it's not, it's a much bigger issue in your own head than like, oh my god, my husband's upset. It's like, no, I'm literally gonna burn in hell. Like, that's like what I'm told. And I think if someone's world is very small, like if they live on a farm and their next neighbor is 5 miles away and like they live literally just with their family on that property, like rather than living in a city and being allowed to go out and everything, or if they just, they could live in a city and they could just live in a very like abusive household where like even though you live in a city you feel like you're completely transplanted from that, like you feel like there's walls between your life, your world, and everybody else. Like that's a scenario too. It's mainly, I would just say, with like domineering, controlling, or like abusive households where if you're pushing this one rhetoric to your kids, in this case religious, like yeah, they're literally gonna think like, I can't listen to anybody else who's saying, maybe God isn't real, maybe there's like 2 trillion religions and everybody thinks they're right and you're in one of them and it may not be right. Like you're like told that you can't question this, so in that case it's understandable because not only are you like driven by fear from your family and your situation, but you're driven by fear on top of that from this religion saying that you're gonna burn in hell, you're gonna disappoint God, like that's the only reason you're here is like to have kids and reproduce and blah blah blah, and even though I read a really great book and I'm blanking on what it's called. I think it's called The Strangeness of the Bible. And it was very interesting because it was basically, it's not necessarily deconstructing religion, but it was looking at like all of the not only misconceptions and mistranslations in the Bible, but also so many things that just don't add up, that don't make sense. And they always have like, people who are really religious always have like that, well, there are multiple authors in it. And it's like, yeah, but they're saying wildly different things. And like, just picking something like that apart where like, I feel like when you're reading a religious book, you have like this itch to like critically think and just be like, wait, that doesn't make sense from what I read 10 pages ago. But like you're told from the church or whatever, believers are like around you, that like you can't do that. Like this is the law, this is the word, you can't look into it. Like that's not allowed, essentially, God wouldn't want that. And so you're literally training yourself within that, like in reprimanding to like distrust your own, not only your own like eyes and views, but also like you are not supposed to be critically thinking about certain things, like period. Like, and I see that come up a lot even in current day, like back in like yonder day with like the traditional world where you lived in like a village and everything, like, and if you wanted to know something, you could ask your village mates, or you could ask mainly like the priest who has all the answers, and they're all just, well, in the Bible it says this, where like that's your answer. Like you're not supposed to like, be a scientist or be curious or look around in any way and wonder anything different. But then in like the modern world now, where we don't have that anymore, you don't have to go to the church, you can go to a school, you can go to a book, like you can, there's a million things you can look at if you're wondering something. But there are still so many people who, even in like the Bay Area, like in, big, like heavily metropolitan areas, are like, if the Bible says it, that's that. And even if there have been like breakthroughs since then, or like scientific ideas that have been proven or not, or whatever, or like, when it comes to rigid gender roles and stuff like that, even if like sociologists have proven this is why this is this way, this is why like the government is pushing these roles, like there's a reason for that has nothing to do with religion, that's just a basis and like a jumping off point with which you can push these ideas, like they still don't like question it. And I think it gets to a point where it's also like, this is just easier, like it's easier to not question this. And I know, like, getting back to like traditional housewives and homemakers. I've been told it should be homemakers instead of housewives, but like women in that position where I know certain women who are in that position and they're like 70s, 80s, like they've been that their whole life, and understandable due to age, like, you know, I know with their circumstances, like, you just didn't really have another choice per se, but I can also easily tell that they're very unhappy in that, and it's very obvious that, especially for one of them, that like they don't want to really say that they're wildly unhappy in it because they don't want to come to terms with the idea that like, oh my god, my whole life has been wasted. Like, I didn't get to do anything I want to do. I didn't get to act or think or be the way that I wanted to be. Like, I didn't have these opportunities. And even once it got to, you know, legally the point where you can have those opportunities, like, you're already so deep in that, like, you don't have an education. You've been out of the workforce for like 40 years, you know, like, what are you gonna do? Like, it's just, you're so trapped in it. And there's a really good quote, and I don't remember who it's from. I could look it up, but I'm not gonna do that. But it's basically like saying a lot of women aren't like feminists or don't want to think in that way, because once you look into that, you realize how pervasive it is and how it's in like just like you see it everywhere, and you realize that even people like so close to you are like that and have these like micro tendencies towards that, because it's what we're all like shown in media, and how it's like, it's basically like too painful to be aware of all the time. And this is like exactly where I see this one woman I'm thinking of is like, it would just like, you can tell that they know that, but like literally admitting it to themselves or admitting it out loud would like, it's like error 404. Like, it would be like an imploding in their brain of like the realization of how much time was not theirs, you know, where they basically like, the thing about like gender roles, and I'm looking at specifically from a women's perspective here, like, you're playing a role. Like, that's exactly it. Like, you're an actor. You're not forming connections with someone that you're dating or may marry or whatever, or even a prospective boyfriend. Like, even a guy friend, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, like, you're not yourself. You don't even know who you are, and you're not encouraged to find out who you are, because if that's different, which it probably will be, from this very like small slice of like, this is what's allowed, you know, if it's different from that, then it's like, well, what are you going to do at that point? You just like, oh, this is me, but either I have to squash it, or if you're looking at whatever it may be from like more of a religious perspective, then it's like, oh, it's wrong. There's something wrong with me because I feel this way or like this or think this or whatever. And like, I have to just pray to God for it to go away, or I have to go to a therapist, or I have to whatever. I know therapy isn't necessarily that big in like super, super, super religious households. It's more so just like pray about it and that should fix it. But it's just, it's all a level of manipulation, and it's just insane. It's just so insane. And like, a lot of the women who really, really, really like encourage and like hype up these gender roles for other women, like, I don't know anyone who has like some fucking masterclass in femininity, like, or anything like that, so I can't tell what that person is like in their real life when they're not playing this role online. But like, I do know certain people who are housewives, homemakers, whatever, and who have been that for a long time, and they, instead of saying don't do this, they have so much internalized misogyny and so much like, you can tell, hatred towards their own lives, that they are fervently pushing that on other women so that they also will end up being unhappy and like living a shitty life, because like, they don't want them to have the opportunities and like the joy that they were deprived. And that's, I mean, to a degree I can see that that's like human nature, but it's also really sad. One thing I've also noticed is like, people who are, or women who are like pushing that towards other women, they're very, very, very controlling, and it's almost like they're like trying to funnel that like control into something specific. If you're doing a course on this, then you're funneling the control into like other people, but you kind of have your own choice because you're literally making your own money with that. Like you can step away from it and do something else, like if you have the business skills to do it, but it may not be as, I mean, I know a lot of like red pill pipeline guys do that because like that's the easiest way to make money. Just say something absolutely insane and people will pay attention, like the fringe effect basically. But when it comes to like women who are literally stuck in that like housewife scenario and they hate it, like I noticed that they funnel that anger into like a level of self-discipline, a level of discipline to their kids, like to the point where it can be like abusive, and a level of like discipline just in life. Like everything has to be perfect because like they can't actually express how unhappy they are, because then all of that charade of playing a role falls apart. And like it, interestingly enough, reminds me or makes me think of like women who, I'm not saying these women are anorexic, but women who struggle from anorexia typically are like high achieving perfectionists, like type A, and that's like a form of control. And it's just interesting that this is like so similar, and it's just like taken out in a different way. Also, somebody was saying on like some femininity TikTok, whatever, like femininity coaching thing, that like to get a high value man, like to deserve or be worthy of like a high value man, you need to take really good care of your body. So basically like work out, be skinny, just it's kind of just like thinspo like propaganda basically, because if you work out and are fit but aren't, you know, like a Victoria's Secret model size, then it doesn't count apparently. But which also is just racist. That's really just, that's, yeah, like if you don't have like the white girl tiny body type, then like that's wrong, that's racist. It's all, I mean, trying to push traditional gender roles from the fucking 50s is also like very Eurocentric and yeah, racist in the way that they like talk about like you can't use certain language and you can't cuss because that's masculine, and specific language, like you should use proper English, you can't use slang, so like other dialects don't count. And it's like, yeah, you're getting into like a cultural issue here and a race issue here more so than just like properly being a woman. But anyway, yeah, so the idea of like you don't deserve like a high value man unless you take really good care of yourself, you're fit, you're small, you're skinny, aka easy to dominate, like let's be real, and also fit the trophy model stereotype. I feel like that also plays into this like super capitalistic mindset, because if in America it was like housing is a human right and like food is a human right, and you know, if we had that, then you would not be like, you have to do all this to your own body to earn this person, or to be worthy of like this person's love or whatever. It's not really love, let's be real, but you know, like this idea that everything you have to do has to be earned. You can't just exist and be a good person, like you have to like work towards it. But also that's such a Hollywood like ideal of like you have to work your ass off just when it comes to working out, and then you have to get all these procedures and you have to get all of this stuff done on your physical self to get ahead. And in this case it's like the same thing, but none of that has to do with your personality. It doesn't have to do with here or here. And I know they're gonna say like, well, a typical like gender roles man isn't gonna value you for like your brain, just for how well you play the role of a fucking maid and like babysitter for his kids, and as much as you have like a fucking fertile womb. But it's just but also there was this study's I think fairly old, but it was saying that like women control like 85% of like the household budget, like because if you know they're like stay-at-home mom, like they're going to be going out and like getting groceries and taking care of the house and blah 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 and spending money and doing all that, right, while the guy's at work. And I think it's so important to also realize, especially because like women are being pushed towards this currently because, oh, it's economic. Like if you can't afford something, then why don't you work on yourself to find a provider man who can, like, you know, take care of you financially, right? That is one thing, that is one train of thought. But at the same time, you are spending so much money playing into consumerism and capitalism that, like, if you saved that money and that time and spent it doing something else, you could actually better your life personally without having to like shrink yourself or train yourself to play a specific role, like as if you're a politician in public office getting media trained. That's basically what it is. Because like imagine how much time and money these women are spending on their hair, their makeup, fillers, Botox, like laser, like facials, like all these things, maybe lipo, maybe like cool sculpting, maybe like, you know, their clothes and maybe a fake tan, and like literally all of these things that they are doing to their body. Like it's literally just furthering. And there's so much consumerism in it, and it's so absolutely ridiculous, and it's like such hard capitalism that it's insane. And like this makes me think of when people say like, and this saying alone I think is good, but I think it also should be like looked into a little bit deeper, where, you know, it's encouraged for women, where it's like, if you want to wear makeup, you want to wear a certain outfit or whatever, make sure that you're doing it for yourself instead of for a guy. And that sounds good on the surface, but I think it's very important to sort of deconstruct that and be like, if I'm doing this for myself and if I like this makeup look or this outfit or whatever, why do I like that though? Like the point of like manipulation in the media is that it goes unnoticed, but it sticks subconsciously. Because if you just said very openly to someone's face certain things, they'd be like, whoa, what the hell, like fuck off, I don't believe in that. But if you get it to stick, where they just start subconsciously forming their opinions around that, then it works. So it's like, you may like it and you may like the way that you look in a certain way, but it's also important to deconstruct why that is, and to see like, are there some, like, because I think so many women have internalized misogyny because that's literally what's pushed all the time. So like, duh, that makes sense. But like, to think like, why am I doing this? Why do I like this on me? You know, like just kind of backtrack, like reverse engineer, like backtrack on that. You know what I mean? I think this is the end of my rambling for now. I don't want to do finals, so I'm just thinking and speaking. So